So yes, let's start with a discussion about terms of trade and balance of trade. So I'm going to first recap terms of trade, balance of trade, and then we look at how they are interrelated and so on. So what is terms of trade? We define terms of trade as simply your ratio of export prices to import prices. Remember, we say terms of trade is simply index of export prices over index of import prices times 100. So we came up with this kind of a formula. TOT is PX over PM times 100. So I'm saying index of PM, but index of PX and index of PM, but we can say terms of trade is simply ratio of prices. What is balance of trade? Balance of trade is basically your Px times Qx minus Pm times Qm. In other words, it's the export expenditure or export revenue. Sometimes you can call it export expenditure, export revenue, export expenditure or export revenue minus import expenditure or import revenue for somebody else, right? So what I'm trying to say here, expenditure. What I'm trying to say here is just that when you look at balance of trade is both price times quantity of exports of goods and services. So remember, this is the exports expenditure of goods and services and import expenditure of goods and services as well. So it looks at basically your difference between what you are getting in terms of revenue for exports minus what your expenditure for imports is, and that comes in your current account section of the balance of payment. Remember, current account, we did it yesterday. We said current account has balance of trade, has income section, and has current transfer. So this is balance of trade is basically your export expenditure or revenue minus import expenditure or import revenue for somebody else. Do we get that? Does that make sense? So what's the difference between terms of trade and balance of trade? Well, terms of trade only gives you a ratio of prices, while balance of trade looks at both price times quantity. And therefore, they may have a relationship we need to look at, because sometimes they can ask you that will terms of trade improvement also results in or also result in balance of trade improvement. So is it true that terms of trade, if they go up, they will also make our balance of trade to also go up? And that's the question we need to ask today in our discussion. So let's start off with looking at various cases. But the first thing we're going to look at is, what if I tell you guys this, that your exports are elastic? Okay, before guys I move on to talk about my this discussion, is there any terms of trade and balance of trade? So let's look at the relationship between terms of trade and balance of trade. First, let's assume that exports are elastic. If exports are elastic, what happens? Well, if exports are elastic, let's say, and price of exports is going up. If exports are elastic and price of exports is going up, what happens to terms of trade? The answer is the terms of trade. Just 1 minute, guys. So we missed out on some recording. I'm so sad. But let me just quickly, I'll recap this so that people who missed out can get an opportunity. So guys, if if you look at imports are elastic and PM is going up, if PM is going up, then one could argue this the PX over PM is your terms of trade, right? So if PM is going up and PM becomes expensive, so price of imports will go up. If price of imports go up, then Px over Pm, you can say the denominator will become bigger, and because the denominator becomes bigger, terms of trade will worsen. So one could argue this, that TOT will worsen. Does that make sense, guys? Do you all agree to your TEU worsening because of imports becoming expensive? Sandesh, what's your question? Because you said big no. I don't know why you said no. Then comes this balance of trade. Let's look at balance of trade. For balance of trade, what you look at is basically Px times Qx minus Pm times Qm. Now, uh, now price of imports is going up, right? If price of imports is going up, quantity of imports will fall, right? If quantity of imports is going down, and if the goods are elastic, right? If the goods are elastic and price of imports is going up, then one could argue this quantity of imports, if elastic, quantity of imports will fall by much more, right? Which means big M will go down. So X minus M is your balance of trade. And you can see this, given exports remain unchanged, if M is going down, balance of trade will also go down, which would mean that if your imports are elastic, not only your terms of trade will worsen when imports become expensive, but balance of trade will also worsen because imports are becoming expensive and they are elastic. Do you guys get that? I'm sorry, I did something wrong, guys, by the way, because if this is a negative number, balance of trade actually balance of trade will actually go up because this is negative, right? The negative is becoming smaller. So if it was like minus 10, it becomes minus 5, balance of trade will actually go up. So in this case, actually, what we say is this, that terms of trade is going down. I'm sorry, guys. Terms of trade will go down, but balance of trade will go up. And the reason why balance of trade is going up is because this negative number is becoming smaller. You guys get that? So that's why we got to be a little careful because यहाँ पे हो क्या रहा है कि because your imports were elastic, this negative number becomes, rather than let's say minus 20, becomes minus 5. So you are basically looking at x minus m expression to become bigger. Make sense? So if imports are elastic and imports become expensive, so one thing we need to talk about is this, that the terms of trade has nothing to do with quantity. Terms of trade is only ratio of prices. But balance of trade, because it has to do with price times quantity, elasticity matter. And I just recap this kind of discussion because we failed to record it. That we said that if exports are becoming expensive, terms of trade is exports over imports. So exports become expensive, terms of trade will go up because PX is going up. But balance of trade में क्या होगा? Because PX is becoming expensive and it is inelastic, right? We said this, that quantity of exports will fall by much less or by little, making export expenditure to go up. So while exports are becoming expensive, your export expenditure also, or export revenue also goes up because goods are inelastic. Like it's like selling oil. If you're a seller of oil, the balance of trade will actually go up when the price of your exports are going up. So in other words, both the terms of trade and balance of trade improves when the goods are exports are inelastic. But when your exports are elastic and exports become expensive, right? If exports become expensive, so what happens to your terms of trade? We say terms of trade is simply px over px, so terms of trade improve. But because exports are elastic, quantity of exports will fall by much more, because when the price goes up, quantity will fall, but by much more, making export expenditure to fall or export revenue to fall. And that would mean even your balance of trade may x minus m may, the x is going down, and therefore balance of trade will actually worsen. Now let's do the last case. So to see, what if imports are inelastic? Okay, let's look at if imports are inelastic. If imports are inelastic and price of imports go up, what happens to terms of trade? Well, terms of trade is px over pm. price of imports is going up, and therefore terms of trade will actually worsen, right? But what about balance of trade? Balance of trade is simply px times qx minus pm times qm. So in this case, your this part is export expenditure, that's unchanged, but PM is going up. And if it's inelastic, QM will fall by much less. And that's why if they fall by much less, it's like Pakistan is importing oil, which is inelastic in nature, and imports expenditure will actually go up. Now, if you look at x minus m, because this m negative part is going up and it is being subtracted, so you're subtracting a bigger number, I would say the balance of trade will also, in this case, because of the fact that your negative number is becoming bigger, balance of trade will fall. Exactly. So terms of trade will worsen and even balance of trade will worsen. Do you guys get that? Does that make sense? So this is the story here that we've just made. That so I can make a table, by the way. I can say exports elastic, inelastic, and imports elastic and inelastic. Okay, and in all our four cases, we made the price to go up. So price is going up. What will happen to terms of trade and balance of trade? Okay, so price is rising. So let me write this: price is rising for both exports. For once we said exports and imports. So if exports are elastic, guys, and price is going up, terms of trade will improve, improve, right? Because terms of trade is simply ratio of prices of exports and imports. So px over pm. Px is going up, terms of trade will improve and improve. But for imports case, when PM is going up, so this is Px going up, and यहाँ पे लिखता हूँ PM going up. For Px going up, terms of trade will improve for both the cases, be it elastic or inelastic. But for PM case, terms of trade will worsen and worsen. Why? Because Px over PM may, if Px over PM may, if PM is going up, your terms of trade will worsen. But if the goods are elastic, guys, if the goods are elastic, let's look at this one. First case, if our exports were elastic, because they were elastic, when the price went up, quantity will fall by much more and balance of trade will worsen. So your balance of trade will worsen. But in this case, when they're inelastic, balance of trade will improve. While if the goods are elastic and imports are becoming expensive, if they're elastic, look at this, guys. If they're elastic, we said that you can easily replace the goods which are elastic, right? And then when they become expensive, you will easily replace. Well, so therefore, quantity of imports will fall by much more, and this means import expenditure will fall, which means balance of trade will actually go up. So this will worsen, this will improve, and this case it will worsen. The last case it will worsen. Guys, does that make sense? So this could be a useful table to look at. That uh, so if somebody asks you, does terms of trade worsening always means balance of trade worsening? And the answer is not necessarily. It all depends on elasticity of demand, because it could be possible exports if your exports are inelastic, then terms of trade and balance of trade both can improve if the price is going up, and so on and so forth. Did you guys get that? Does that make sense? Any questions before we move on? Are we good? Does that make sense? Are we good to Are we good with the content that we've done so far? So, guys, it's a little bit of calculations that are required. Thoda sa, but there's a lot of stuff that comes in exam which can test us on this content. Let me try to sort of find a question as well. If you could sort of look at some of the questions from this chapter. Just give me 1 minute. Hi, guys. So let's look at question number 24. What has happened when a country's terms of trade are said to have moved in a favorable direction? So they're saying terms of trade is going up. What could be a possible answer for this one? Anyone who can tell me the answer for this one? D, exactly. So the ratio of index of export prices, PX over PM, must be going up. So D is the right answer. Awesome. D is the right answer because a ratio of export prices to import prices is going up, which means PX over PM is going up. And that could be leading to terms of trade to go up. Does that make sense, guys? Are we good? So D is the right answer, which is why? Because terms of trade is ratio of export prices to ratio of import prices. Okay. Um, an economy's terms of trade has gone from 100 to 110. So 110 is the new terms of trade. So remember, it's PX over PM. It's gone from 100 to 110. Okay. Now the question is asking us, Yaya, you're saying what does B mean? More foreign currency enters the country to pay for exports. Well, B basically means that you're paying for exports of foreign. I mean, uh, B basically is looking at quantity, or B looks at basically the revenue, while terms of trade is not about revenue. Terms of trade is only about prices. The fact that you are getting more revenue for exports doesn't really have to do anything with the terms of trade, which is simply a ratio of prices. Okay, number 21. In 21, they're saying that the terms of trade has gone to 110. So one way it has gone to 110 could be simply, guys, look at this. If this index becomes 20 over this index becomes 10, then the numerator is going up by 10% and denominator is going up, let me use another color, by 10. Numerator is going up by 20% and denominator is going up by 10%. This means overall this expression will be going up by 20% minus 10% or 10%. The rule to remember, guys, is in percentages. Percentages are like logs. Like if the numerator over denominator, if I give you this for anything, and numerator is going up by, let's say, X%, denominator is going up by Y%, then overall expression, let's say this overall expression will be X% minus Y% will be going up by that much. Similarly, if two percentages, let's say X% is multiplied by Y%, right? So this is going up by X%, this is going up by Y%. Let's say this is A and B. If two numbers are, they give you a percentage growth of this and they ask you what's the total growth, you'll say A plus B, or rather you'll say X plus Y. Make sense? So whenever percentages are divided, whenever the two expressions are divided and I give you percentage of that, you can subtract that. Whenever two expressions are multiplied and I give you percentage changes in them, you can add them to find out the total. So in this case, 20% minus 10%, the answer will be D. Got it? Just 1 minute, guys. I want to look at another question. This may we can look at elasticity as well. Let me find a question on the elasticity. If not, sorry. Can you guys see the screen? Okay. So in this question, what is happening is this, that it's saying the country's terms of trade has gone up from 100 to 110. So if 100 to 110, uh, one possible answer could be, I agree with you guys. One possible answer could be C, which is export is going up by 10%. If this is going up PX over PM, if this is going up by 10% and this is 0, so 10% minus 0 is also 10%. You're right. So there could be a possible answer could be C also. But B says 20%, which is 20% minus 10%. D should also lead to a 10% answer. So that's also true. So let me get back to you with this one, whether C or D is the right answer. But the rule is basically the one that I'm using is simply that, when you have two expressions, and in those two expressions, if you have a case of uh, percentage change, then you could have a problem. The only thing that I can sort of understand, guys, which is why maybe D is wrong, is simply because this is an index and not a percentage change. So if that is the case, if index is going up by 10%, then C is the right answer. Let me explain this one more time for everyone. But for that, let's just assume right now that this percentage rule does not apply. If the percentage rule does not apply, then terms of trade is simply px over pm times 100. And if px is going up by 10%, right, and pm is not changing at all, then when the terms of trade is going from 100 to 110, the right answer would be because exports prices are going up by 10%. So your index will become 110, right? Does that make sense? 110. Can somebody do me a favor? What is 120 over 110 times 100? Can somebody find that out for me? 120 over 110 times 100? It's 109. So that's why D is wrong. While C is 110 over 100 times 100. Isn't that true? So C is 110. So that's why C is the right answer. Do you guys get that? Does that make sense, guys? Exactly. So the reason why D is wrong is because of the fact that if I put the value, it becomes 120 over 110 times 100. So my first sort of approach was basically wrong, because in the first approach, I was not treating it as an index. I just realized this: when you have an index, you can actually put the value from 100, your export went to 120. And from 100, your import value went to 110. Times 100, the value would have be 109. So that's why C is the right answer and not D, because D key value is coming out to be 109. Yes, I want to talk about the formula that I used. It's basically the formula that we use in sort of sometimes. Remember, I told you MV is equal to PT. If I told you MV is equal to PT, and I say this, that P is going up by 20%. Okay, if somebody says P is going up by 20% and T is going up by 10%, and M is constant. If somebody tell you this, what is V going to change by? If somebody asks you this, and the answer will be, if P is going up by 20% and T is going up by 10%, then V will go up by 20% plus 10%, which is going to be 30%. Make sense? So there could be a question like this kind of coming, but the only thing that is to understand here is this, that in this case, MB equals to PT, P and T are not indexes. P and T are two variables. So when two variables are multiplied and I give you their percentages growth rate, you can add the percentages growth rate. But let's say I give you another one. I say this, that let's say x over y is equal to z. Okay. If x is going up by 5% and y is going up by 4%, what will happen to z? Z will be going down by, or going up by 5 plus 4 or 5 minus 4 or 1%. Got it? Where do we use this formula? Sometimes you can use this formula in real income. Like for example, real income is equal to money income over price level. Okay. If price level is going up by 5% and money income is going up by 7%, real income, what will happen to real income? Anyone? What will happen to real income? Anyone who can tell me? Anyone who can tell me what will happen to real income? Real income will be going up by 2%. Exactly. Exactly. So this is where the formula that we have to use should be incorporated here, but not the one that I did that. So that's basically where the, Talal Haris was asking, where do we use this formula? This is where we use this formula. But this one I was wrong initially because I didn't do simply 120 over 110 times 100. I should have done that. I shouldn't have used the other approach because this is an index. This is not a variable. Okay, guys, I am done for today. Now, tomorrow, guys, we are starting a new chapter. So, tomorrow we are starting a new chapter, which is simply, just let me just quickly go to that, which is an exchange rate chapter. It's a very important chapter. Tomorrow and day after tomorrow, we are done with the class right now. Tomorrow and day after tomorrow, we're starting exchange rate. So, don't miss it, please. And I'm going to pause recording, and those who want to go can go. Okay. Tomorrow's class is, yes, going to be from 9 to 9:55, hopefully. There is no difference between a slump and a recession. So slump means demand is falling, recession is the same thing. So Great Depression was a slump, was a recession actually. A slump means basically a trend, but Great Depression was a recession. Slump is the beginning, sometimes the beginning of a recession. Kabir, when you have another class during that time, just watch the recording, my bacha. Okay. Thank you guys. Haris, I'm gonna answer your question later. Take care. Bye bye.